Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to another live stream episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. Really appreciate you joining us. Tonight's guest wishes to remain anonymous, and with that in mind, I'm just going to call him Sam on tonight's show. Sam, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate your time. Sam, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Absolutely. I am 44 years old. I'm married, have two kids and a dog. Um, I work in a management position where I have a lot of responsibility for a large company. I live in Southern Ohio. I like old cars. I have a 1970 Chevelle sitting in my driveway right now. I'm looking at it, and something I want to work on soon. Pretty much just your average guy. I'm also a musician. I've been a musician for 20 years. Have a small studio at my home, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much it.
Huh. Sounds to me like the only thing missing is the white picket fence around your property. Or do you have a picket fence?
Actually, I do not. I actually, it's funny that you say that. I used to sell fence, so it's kind of funny that you say that. But no, I live on a lake and a very quiet rural community in southern Ohio. Lots of woods, and it's very rustic, but I love it.
Well, it sounds to me like that picket fence is probably coming sooner rather than later. You've got all the other boxes checked off. Yeah, sounds like a good life you've carved out for yourself. Definitely does. Sam, you're here to talk about a dogman encounter you had, but excuse me, you've had a lot of other experiences with Sasquatch and paranormal beings, all the above. Which experience do you think was the most frightening, though, not including the dogman encounter you had?
Well, I've always had a long history of weird things happen in my life. The one that I can say that is probably the most frightening was I grew up in a home that was well, let's just say it was haunted, um, and something used to come and sit on the end of my bed every night when I was a kid, about 5 6 years old. It started, and you could see the depression in the bed. And of course, I would freak out. I would jump up and run to my parents' room and scream and cry, and they would say I was just having a nightmare or I had an overactive imagination. But you could hear the springs on the bed creak. You could see the sheets depress. Some
Wow.
nights I would cover my head up, and terrified, I would just cover my head up, and as soon as I brought the blanket down, I could feel like breath on my face. Um, it just happened so much. Eventually, I just got more annoyed with it than anything, but it used to terrify me. Um, there were a lot more things that happened in that house. Very, very weird things would happen. A lot of paranormal things, but out of all my experiences, and there's been quite a bit, that's probably some of the worst ones that really kind of live with me to this day. I still, that's just an eerie feeling that I have, that whole something sitting on the end of the bed thing.
Phew. Wow. That's horrible. You poor guy. Nobody should have to go through that. I mean, life as a kid can be difficult enough, not to mention when it's a situation where you have to worry about that every night. That is awful. But the good news is here you are, a grown adult who's well adjusted and you've got a good life carved out for yourself. So it couldn't have been convenient, but at least you got through that. And I mean, you definitely have won at life. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. Like I alluded to just a bit ago, dogmen aren't the only cryptids you've seen. You've also had some Sasquatch experiences. And from what I understand, the first Sasquatch encounter you had was probably the most terrifying one. What can you tell us about that?
Well, my family has a long history with Sasquatch. Up until my own encounter when I was about 7 years old. I grew up on stories from my father's father, my grandfather, who would tell stories about seeing a big hairy monster um, when he was younger. Scared him so bad in West Virginia that he moved to Ohio. But then later, my uncle actually went out hunting with him and supposedly shot a Bigfoot. It's very well known in our family that my uncle was an avid hunter. He'd hunted big game all his life. He was always in the woods, woodsman through and through. But after this encounter, not more than 20 minutes from where I live now, it scared him so bad that he unloaded a full um, clip onto this Bigfoot point blank range. What he called a Bigfoot, my grandfather always called him a demon. I don't know why he called it that, but I grew up on stories of my uncle shooting Bigfoot. But you're right. Later on in life, when I was 7 years old, after my parents got divorced, I would spend a lot of time with my mother's father and mother, my grandparents down in eastern Kentucky. A lot of strange things happened down there, which I think my grandparents were very aware of what these things were. My grandmother would always tell us not to go out at night because the booger would get you. That was always her thing. That was always the threat. Don't go out at night. We couldn't chase lightning bugs. We couldn't go out after dark. But during the day, they didn't care. We could run all over the hills, and they didn't care. But during night, we were in every night. And my family down there, all my family throughout the region down there, because it's a pretty big family, had these stories of what they called the cowker. Apparently, was this big white hairy creature that lived in the woods, and sometimes dogs and animals would go missing. But my grandfather actually, one morning early while I was staying there in the summer, woke me up and invited me to go um, check his trout line. Which, if anybody doesn't know what a trout line is, it's basically just a string between trees, one side of the river and the other. They weighted it down with rocks, put hooks on it, and baited it with crawdads and minnows and whatnot. Now, grandpa usually fished on one side of the river, made this giant S curve, the Kentucky River did, and he usually fished on one side. But this morning he woke me up and he said, "Hey boy, you want to go fishing?" Of course, me being a young kid, I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I want to go see what you caught." And so we get up and we walk this long trek down this dirt road, and they lived in the absolute middle of nowhere. They didn't drive, no phone, no TV, anything like that to speak of. And we walked down to this other part of the river, which was probably a good 3 miles down this dirt road. And we walked down this embankment down to this flat area, which I don't know if you'd call it a river bottom. But there was a hill on one side that had the road, and then a hill on the other side that had just this big giant hill. And we were walking down, and I remember it being super quiet. The only thing I heard was these big tall weeds on either side of this little 1 foot, 1.5 foot dirt path. And it was just super quiet. I smelled this awful smell, which I thought was fish or low river, whatever they call it during the summer when the river's low. They call it the dog days of summer. Don't swim in the river, bacteria or whatever. Well, my grandfather, he's never been really I don't know, an affectionate kind of person. He never really gave us a hug or shook your hand or anything like that. But in this occasion, we started walking down this path, and we heard this awful noise up on the hill to the left of us, opposing the road. And it sounded like something was breaking sticks and making noise. And it just sounded like this awful temper tantrum of like if you imagine Andre the Giant just getting really mad and breaking sticks and throwing things and making this awful noise. Well, my grandfather immediately stopped me, put his hand in the middle of my chest. And like I said, my grandfather never touched me. So when he put his hand in the middle of my chest, I knew something was wrong. And he looked at me and he slowly put his finger up to his mouth to be quiet. And I'm a young kid. I'm 7 years old. I'm like, what? I'm loud. I'm like, what's going on, Grandpa? And he looks at me and just kind of shakes his head and puts his finger back up. And we keep hearing this noise. Well, he grabs my shoulders and he turns me around. He physically turns me around the path, and we start walking back toward the road and back up the embankment. We get back up to the road, and we still hear this awful noise, and it's a horrible. I can't even describe it. It just sounds like something's ripping the woods apart, like a bulldozer's going through the woods, and it's big, whatever it is. And I look at him and I'm like, what's wrong and what's going on. And he's like, well, I'll come back and check that one later. Maybe let's just go home and see what grandma has for breakfast. And of course, me being a kid, I'm like, okay, that was really weird. But looking back, I've heard so many stories of a big white Bigfoot in this area, which my family notorious for the last, well, since my mom was a little girl, probably 60s. They've called this thing the Calker, which I thought was a very unusual name. But listening into podcasts and other research, I've also learned that a lot of Southern people call Bigfoot boogers. Well, my grandmother was notorious for talking about boogers and don't go out at night; they'll get you. So for me, that was I had a lot of other experiences down there throughout a couple summers that I just can't explain. And the only thing I can attribute it to now, knowing what I know and the research I've done and listening to podcasts, is that there was absolutely, without a question of a doubt, a Bigfoot, a white Bigfoot of all things, in that area. And if you do some searching, you'll find that white Bigfoot are actually more common than what you think. I mean, a Bigfoot alone is, wow, a Bigfoot, sounds crazy, but a white one, yeah, that sounds even crazier. But this was kind of a common thing growing up of what my family dealt with and talked about, from shooting Bigfoot to experiencing this to other things that just couldn't really make sense of as a kid. But now as an adult, I'm like, wow, I kind of went through some stuff when I was a kid. So I've had some experiences that have really made me wonder, like, what was really going on. So absolutely, I've had some Bigfoot experience.
Do you think all these experiences that you've had, both the Sasquatch experiences and the paranormal ones, might have, in a way, conditioned you for that Dogman encounter you had?
I don't think anything can condition you for what I saw. I think that I always expected to see a Bigfoot. That was always my thing. I always thought, hey, I'll probably see a Bigfoot one day. Maybe I'll be out or I'll go back home and visit, Kentucky. Maybe I'll see one and, glimpse my eye, corner of my eye, whatever. I never in a thousand years would have imagined that a Dogman was the thing I was going to see. Now, I was that kid that went to the library. I always got the, Mysteries and Monsters of America with Patty and Loch Ness Monster. I love monster movies. I watched all the scary movies growing up. I love monsters and stuff like that, but I never in a thousand years imagined that this would be the thing that I would physically see that would change my life in this way.
Well, you know what they say, you never expect to have a Dogman encounter until you have one. So that's understandable. It is. All right, Sam, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. Well, this would have been October of 2020. I just taken my daughter to a choir recital. So we were driving back from town. I live about 15 miles or 15 minutes outside of town, roughly about 10 miles. And it was about 9:30 at night. We're driving down one of the main highways out of town, and we got about a mile or so, not far out of town. Um, and it was there was no one else on the road. It was quiet, surprisingly. Um, and then all of a sudden, I saw this big wolf dog looking thing shoot across the road. Now, when I say shoot across the road, this thing moved like nothing I have ever seen. I was a Boy Scout. I was, you know, raised in the woods, hunting, fishing, camping. I've seen coyote, I've seen bear, I've seen, all kinds of things. I've seen the documentaries on cheetahs. This thing moved like nothing I've ever seen before. And when it ran across the road, I had a newer car, so the headlights are pretty good. So it was only about 40 feet in front of the car. So I got a really good look, even though it was moving I mean, just amazingly fast. And I kind of took my elbow and I bumped my daughter's elbow, who's sitting next to me, and she's a teenage girl, so she's on her phone. And I said, "Look at that." And she's like, kind of just kind of stared at me after she saw it. And I said, "What was that?" And she goes, "Big dog," sarcastically, like literally teenage girl, "Oh, big dog." And she goes right back to her phone. And I don't know, like there was something about it, the way it moved, was just so unnatural. And I didn't realize how big this thing was until later, and I'll get to that. Um, but what I saw was a large canine wolf-like creature. It had dark brown or black hair. It had a big shaggy mane. It had two big pointed ears like a Doberman Pinscher that stuck straight up. And even though it was moving really fast, the ears were still predominant. They were still sticking straight up. And it had a big muzzle like a German Shepherd. Um, I could tell that it kind of had a tail, but not like a big bushy tail. It looked like all the motion was literally coming from the lower legs. I couldn't tell if the legs in the rear were odd shaped or if the front hands were hands or paws. I couldn't really tell. Um, it was just moving in a way that the legs almost looked like a blur. It covered probably right around 300 yards in a matter of 4 or 5 seconds. I mean, it was that fast. It moved so quick. I can't even explain it. It's hard to put into words how quick this thing moved. But it just so happened to get right in my headlights where I got such a good view of it. I go home. I tell my wife, "Hey, I saw this weird dog thing," and she's like, "Okay." She didn't really think nothing about it. She kind of blew. Well, I got thinking, well, I'm only like 10 minutes from there. It's like 10 minutes from my house. And I started getting a little nervous, but I didn't have like an impeding sense of doom, right? I didn't have this, oh my gosh, it's coming for me or anything like that. But I did, I was cautious of it. I did think that, hey, this thing is pretty close. And that was a big, weird looking dog. Well, a short time later, I went back and I stopped where I saw it on the road. I pulled over. There's like a little area there. You cross a bridge, and there's a big creek, and most both sides of the road are empty. In October, they're cornfields and cow pastures, so it's pretty empty. And I got looking, and there's a construction sign because they just repaved the road. And this construction sign, I go up to it, and I physically, like, I brought out a tape measure. I'm a handy guy. I've got one in the car. I brought one out, and I measured up to where I saw this thing, and the shoulders where this thing was over 4 feet. So in my mind, I instantly got kind of like a shock or a scare. I thought, okay, this thing was way bigger than I thought it was. And now I'm getting more nervous. I'm getting a little bit more anxious. So growing up on a farm and in the woods and whatnot, I immediately thought, okay, if this thing had shoulders that were over 4 foot high, this thing had to weigh over 500 pounds easy. And had it stood up, it probably was in that 8.5, 9 foot realm. So I immediately, you know, went home to my wife. I'm like, hey, I went back out there and this thing was huge. And of course, she again didn't really think anything about it. And of course, I didn't want to tell anyone that I saw this giant wolf like creature for fear of, being mocked or, think I'm crazy. Of course, I've got a job where like, again, I said, I'm got a lot of responsibility. I don't want anybody to think that I'm not stable. So I just couldn't wrap my head around how very big this thing was once I actually got out. I did look for paw prints and whatnot. I didn't see anything, but the way it moved, it almost seemed supernatural, but I did see it impact the environment. I saw it, step in the grass. It ran from a dry creek bed on the left side of the road. It ran immediately in front of me, and it hit the tall grass and the bushes on the right side of the road. Like I said, the space was a good 300 yards, and I could see it impact the environment. So I know it was real. I know it was a flesh and blood animal. It just didn't make sense to me the way that it moved. And I still to this day can't wrap my head around that. It was crazy. It just sounds crazy just saying it, but it was really that fast. Now, after I had the encounter and whatnot, it was probably not too long, but I started having. This is going to sound even crazier. So but trust me, I've never experienced anything like this in my life. I started having strange, lucid, very lucid, like realer than reality dreams. Now, at first, they didn't seem that bad or that awful. They just seemed strange. It was where I could see myself and my family, but we were living this completely different life. My kids' faces looked different. My wife's face looked different. It was so strange. And when I first started having them, I'm like, what is happening? And I actually mentioned to my wife, I said, I've been having these really strange dreams where we're like living this other life, and you don't look like you, and the kids don't look like you, and it's just really strange. Now, over time, these dreams started getting darker and more sinister almost. I started feeling like something was watching me. And then I started this big shadow of like a wolf or a wolf-like creature off in the distance. And it seemed like with every dream, it would get closer and closer. And then eventually the dreams started getting really dark to where I knew, I was with my family. They didn't look like my family. It felt like some kind of alternate reality. Like they didn't look like them, but I knew they were them with all my fiber and being. I knew this was real. Those are my kids. I knew I had a history with them. I love them. I love my wife. This was our life. But it started getting really strange. And even in one dream where, and this is again, it's going to sound nuts, but we're standing on a beach. My kids are there. My wife is there. I have friends that I don't recognize, but I know they're my friends. Everyone's faces look different. And a baby, and this is going to sound crazy, a baby triceratops washes up on the beach, and everyone freaks out and starts running away. Now, they say you can't dream about a face you've never seen, but I've seen tons of them, and they were my own family, but I can't recognize them. I've gone back through social media. I've Googled different faces. I'm kind of an artist, so sometimes I'll sit down and draw. I was drawing a little boy's face one day, and my wife goes, what are you drawing?" And I said, "This is what I dreamed of. That's what our son looks like in this other place that I dreamed about." And she's like, "That's weird." And I said, "I know. I can't explain it. Have you ever seen this kid before?" And she's like, "No, that makes no sense to me." So, but it seemed like the dreams just got more dark and more dark up until the point where this dog-like thing just kept creeping into my dreams. And I don't know if it was just my brain's way of coping with what I saw. Maybe it was just some trauma my brain's trying to deal with. I don't know. I can't say that it's supernatural, but I know that these are super lucid dreams of alternate realities that I can't explain. Now, short time after these dreams started getting dark, I did wake up one night and I swear I saw a giant wolf-shaped shadow standing in the doorway. Now, I've heard all the stories, I've listened to podcasts, I've heard, these things follow you home or they haunt your dreams. Whatever this was huge, and it terrified me. I couldn't make out details, but I could tell it was the outline of this big dog upright canine, and I couldn't move. I mean, I was petrified. Now, I don't know, some people could say that was a dream, but I don't think it was a dream. I felt awake. I felt like I was looking at something that just sucked the life out of me, like those, creatures on Harry Potter when they suck all the will to live and life out of you, like, the that's how I felt, like this thing was there to just suck every part of that was happy out of me. And eventually it disappeared, and I jumped up and I started freaking out. I had an instant panic attack. My wife was like, "What's wrong?" And I said, I saw something. I can't explain it. I don't know. I don't know if it's related. Again, I don't know if it's my brain trying to make sense of this Dogman encounter, but these things have never happened to me. I've had some weird stuff happen, paranormal type stuff, but nothing like these lucid dreams or this wide awake experience of something standing in, my night. Now, I have had a couple other strange things happen since this. I have recently, I had laid my son down. I have a young son. I laid him down in his bed in his room, and I'd fell asleep in there next to him in his bed. And he's got a little Spider-Man bed that's really low to the floor, so it's hard for me to get up and down. But I laid down and I didn't realize that I fell asleep. Well, about 2:47, 2:48 in the morning, I know this because I grabbed my phone as soon as it happened. I heard this loud knock on his door. Well, it was loud enough that it woke me up. I mean, like, jolted me out of a dead sleep. And then I'm laying there and I'm trying to get like my bearings. I'm trying to figure out what just happened. Did a picture fall off the wall? What happened? And then it did it again. And I could hear the door frame rattle. It was so hard. I thought maybe my wife was up or my daughter. So I get up out of this low profile bed. I swing open the door. I flip on the hallway light and there's no one there. I walk into my bedroom. My wife's there asleep, dead asleep. I look at my daughter's room. The dog is out. Dog didn't make a noise. Now this dog, as soon as you knock on the door or someone walks in the driveway, this dog is barking. Didn't make a sound. And I thought, okay, what's happening? So I go around, look at all the pictures on the wall, look at, maybe something fell. Then I start thinking, uh-oh, did something hit the side of the house? So I flip on all these floodlights. I have 360 floodlights around my house. I flipped them all on. It lights up my yard and my side lot. I can see everything on it. I come outside, I light up a cigarette, and I'm walking around, and I'm outside for like 15, 20 minutes, just looking, and I don't see a soul. And I'm like, what was that? That's never happened to me before. Nothing like this has happened to me since I was a little kid. And part of me was wondering, and I know Vic, you and I talked about this, but did seeing this dog man open up a door or open up something inside me to where I'm starting to experience more paranormal activity? I don't know. But I know that the Dogman sighting was one of the scariest things I've ever experienced in my life. The only thing I can attribute it to or even describe it to when I'm trying to tell someone, which I don't tell a lot of people about this because I don't want to seem crazy, but this thing looked like a gnarly American and or what is it, American Werewolf in London, that old movie. That's how it looked. It didn't look scrawny. It had wider shoulders and kind of tapered down to the back. You could tell it was bigger up front than it was in the rear. But it looked just like this gnarly, well, what other word can you use but werewolf from what I, grew up on these movies, Silver Bullet and whatnot. But the American Werewolf in London was pictured this thing as, and it just impacted me in a way that I can't explain it. I'm a pretty logical, well-headed guy. I don't, do drugs or anything like that. I just pretty average guy, but this would change my life in a way that most people can't understand. Like when you try to explain it to people, they just, you get that deer in the headlights look like, hey, I saw this. And then you explain and you describe, and they look at you like, okay. But until you actually see it, and now these things are real. Now, we grew up on monster movies. These things are not supposed to exist. And I saw one 40 feet in front of my car. I couldn't imagine not being inside my car. These people that have had these up close personal encounters with these things, I can only imagine the trauma that this has caused them. This is something that is so raw fear, emotion. This thing is real and it is so terrifying, just out of your nightmares. Now, do I feel traumatized by this? I mean, it's definitely changed me in a way that I don't think I'll ever recover. It's definitely opened a door. I'm more interested than I am traumatized. I take precautions, I go out at night, I flip all my floodlights on. I just don't want to walk up on something, accidentally or surprise and have that fear again. I'd rather have my lights on and see something off in the distance than I would up close. Now, again, I don't have like I'm not going to go out and look for one. Would I like to see one again? I don't know. The I think I'd rather see a Bigfoot from 400 yards away through a pair of binoculars than I would one of these things again because they're just so terrifying. But I'll tell you that it is a life changing event that most people can't wrap their heads around, and it changed me in a way that I haven't felt since I was a little kid, and I've got more strange, weird things that are happening. My place of employment, I've got these strange videos from night security of shadow people and weird things happening that haven't happened to me since I was 6, 7, 8 years old. And I can only attribute it to seeing this Dogman. And I can tell you the Dogman is a legitimate thing. Like, for all those people out there who hear this and know, I hope that this educates you in a way that you can understand that these things are real. They do exist. And I'm a big supporter of Vic and his show because he tries to help people who have been traumatized by this. I can see where that could happen very easily. I was fortunate. I was in my car. I was prepared, in a way that most people weren't, that had an up close encounter. Or, could you imagine being one of these people that had it, tapping on their window in the middle of the night, this big 9 foot grinning, werewolf looking creature tapping on your window, or mind speaking to you to come outside? I can't imagine the trauma and the terror that that would put in a person, that it would be hard to recover from. So for this show, I think that that is amazing. What Vic is doing, I think, is great, helping people. I don't think that I was traumatized, but I definitely was impacted in a way that I don't think there's ever going back to a normal life again. It's I think about it a lot. I read a lot. I listen to podcast after podcast. I read, I watch YouTube videos. You can easily tell where these people are faking this, because when you've seen one for real, you're like, okay, no, that's not real. I've seen trail cameras and AI generated pictures, and I'm like, no, that doesn't look anything like what I saw. Same with Bigfoot. I've never actually saw Bigfoot, but usually you can tell, okay, that's fake, that's made up. But I can I can tell everyone who's listening, Dogman is a real thing, and it is just it's I think it's part of nature. I really do. I think, just like Sasquatch, I think that it's part of nature, whether they have paranormal abilities, or the ability to mind speak, teleport, portal, whatever it is. I don't know about all that. I don't know if I buy into the Nephilim theory. I love listening to a lot of different theories about what they are, but honestly, I just think it's a part of nature. I think they've been here for a very long time, all the way back to Egyptian times. You have Anubis, you have the Nephilim, you have all these stories of hybrid creatures. I think they've been here for a very long time. I just don't know what it is, but I do know it's something straight out of a horror movie, in every way. So I hope that, maybe me telling my story will help someone out there to understand that, even though you saw this thing, you're still up and walking around. If it wanted to get you, it could. I've been in the woods 1,000 times, a million times when I was a kid. Nothing's ever came at me, and I can only imagine how many times these things are watching us. If they wanted us, they could. Maybe they know. Maybe they know that, if I kill a human, then 50 other ones are going to come and into my home and into my territory, and they're going to, come with their guns, and maybe they have a spoken language of some kind, or a spoken history. Maybe they know, just like Bigfoot. Hey, if I do something wrong and mess with these little, humans, then there's going to be repercussions. Then 100 of them or 50 of them are going to come in and tromp through my woods and try to find out what happened, or shoot and attack. I don't know. I really think that there's more to it. There's probably a lot more to it than what we know. But I'll tell you what, this is eye opening to have actually seen physical something in my adult life that I can't explain. So I hope that this, helps others, and just know that everything will be okay. And I really feel like educating people and telling the truth, because obviously I don't go out and announce this, or scream this from the street corner. This is just something that happened to me, that I hope that, people understand that, these things are real. And the more you learn about them, the better you are. And I don't think they're bloodthirsty killers. But I do think, just like people, I think there could be bad ones, there could be good ones. Of course, there could be, just like humans, there could be, you might find one that's just in a bad mood one day, or one that, is not mentally well, or was just shot at, or, you could, of course, there's always that chance. And these things would be the ultimate predator killer, that you would not want to be next to one that was like that. But I can't say, for sure, but that's, again, I'm just guessing. But I think that for the most part, these things just want you to leave them alone and stay out of their area. Um, Now, why this one ran across the road when it did, because I had no traffic behind or in front of me, why it ran across the road when it did, I don't know. I think they're super smart. I think they could be smarter than us in a lot of ways to, keep out of, the public eye and hide the way they do. But I don't know. There's a lot of this seeing a dog man has actually opened more questions than answers than what I thought. I thought when I actually finally saw something, I would have answers, but actually, it's created way more questions than I ever could imagine. So that's my dogman encounter.
That's how it always is. Anytime you have a dogman encounter, you always wind up with more questions than answers. That's just part of it, unfortunately. You said the dogman moved like nothing you'd ever seen before, Sam. Did it look hindered in its movements in any way, or was it totally smooth?
It was completely smooth. And by that, I mean like most four-legged creatures, when they run, you can see the shoulders roll. This thing looked like all the motion was generated from the lower legs. I didn't see any shoulder roll. It looked like a straight, maybe not completely straight. Maybe the back was angled a bit down, but it moved so fluently, like it was effortless. But it had to be running at speeds. I mean, I can't even imagine to cover that much area and to look almost like a blur. Had I been, you know, 2 seconds earlier or 3 seconds earlier, I wouldn't have caught it with the lights. I probably would even have saw it. It was so fast. But I just so happened to be at the right time at the right place where my headlights lit it up. And when it lit it up, I could see this thing moving just effortlessly, but incredibly fast. I mean, you could. There's no way you could outrun one of these things. There's no way. What I saw, there's no way. If it wants you, it's going to get you.
You're right. It's good you understand that. And to answer a question you asked just a bit ago, I think you had that encounter because it wanted you to see it. It could have very easily, as you know, just waited and hid until you went past and then just crossed the road then. But yeah, I think you saw that dog man because it wanted to make an impression on you.
Well, it definitely made an impression. It's caused some very chaotic and crazy things to happen. That's unnerving, but yeah, I would agree. I don't think that we see them without them wanting us to for whatever reason.
Unfortunately, yeah, I think you're right. Here's something that really sticks in my craw, Sam. Your wife didn't believe you when you tried to tell her about your encounter. Has the fact that she doesn't believe you when you told her about that experience strained your relationship with her at all?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has. We've definitely had some challenges since I've had my encounter, since I've had my sighting. But you have to understand, she grew up in a very religious, very, very religious household where they don't talk about this kind of stuff. They weren't allowed to watch scary movies. They weren't allowed to, they didn't even celebrate Halloween. Um, so in my mind, when I told her, I almost think like she was programmed to not be able to accept it. You know what I mean? Like I feel like like maybe she just was conditioned in a way that when I told her, she just completely, changed the subject and went the opposite direction because that's how she was raised. So I don't know if it's really any fault of hers or if it's just her conditioning through this very Christian upbringing. Um, I don't know. It didn't really. I mean, it doesn't really bother me, but it has put some strain on us because I want her to believe me. I want her to know that I saw this thing, but at the same time, I don't know if she's capable of comprehending or understanding or acknowledging based on how she was raised, like accepting it. Does that make sense?
I can understand why you would feel that way and think that, but whatever the reason is that your wife doesn't believe you, that's immaterial to me. I just say shame on her. Here's the woman who took you through all the good times and the bad. She's supposed to stand behind you every bit as much as you're supposed to stand by her. And it sure sounds to me like you stand behind her more than she ever is going to stand behind you. Shame on her for not believing you. It's clear you're not the type of person to be a liar. So she should just flat out accept it is fact when you tell her that you had such an experience. I don't care how hard it is to wrap her mind around this idea that you saw something look like a werewolf out there. But yeah, if you told her that that's the experience you had, she should definitely buy into that. My girlfriend, I could tell her anything like that, and she knows flat out I do not lie. So she's going to believe me and know that that's how it is. That's what happened to him. So, yeah, I mean, that's the way it should be with anyone. If they actually love you, they should believe you. But as you know, unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. I've got the first question for you from the listener chat. It's from Baby Girl, and her question is, did it seem like the Dogman had a supernatural vibe to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can solely base that on the speed. Now, I don't know if that was supernatural or its natural ability, but to me it seemed supernatural because I couldn't explain how such a large creature could move so fast. Like, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. So in my mind, immediately I thought, well, it's got to be supernatural. But then again, I saw it impact the environment. I saw it, moving through the grass and the weeds. So yeah, I would say that there's definitely something something not natural. I don't know if I call it supernatural, but it's definitely not natural about these things.
A lot of eyewitnesses report sensing or seeing something about these dogmen they encounter where it strongly points towards them definitely having some kind of a supernatural vibe. So that would fit. This next question would be from Aussie Tiger, and their question is, does Sam believe that he is chosen for all these encounters?
You know, I don't know if I'm chosen. I can't say one way or the other. I know that I do have a lot of Native American blood. My great grandmother on my father's side was Blackfoot. My great grandmother on my mother's side was Cherokee. Um, my grandmother, if you saw her, you know right away, dark complexion, long black hair. Before she passed away, she would always have these dreams that we always call them the weird dreams, but I have them. My mom has them, and it's basically a very strange dream that you can't explain, but later it makes sense, right? So when I was in high school, I dreamed that I saw my aunt wearing a white dress. I was walking away from the school, and I was eating cake. I thought that was just really strange, right? You wake up and you're like, what is happening? I'm a teenager. I'm having this dream. What is happening? And then, 2 weeks later, my uncle dies. Guess what? My aunt is wearing a white dress. I'm not in school. And afterwards, they had cake. So I think my grandmother had an ability, maybe way stronger than mine. Mine might be diluted. My mother still has these strange dreams. Maybe, maybe it's part of it. Maybe I'm sensitive to it. Maybe that's why, I experienced all the strange paranormal stuff when I was little. Maybe I was a little sensitive to it, but I can't say. I don't know. It's just it's sometimes it's almost a burden because I feel things from people that I don't really want to feel. So maybe that's kind of how this was. Maybe it's I don't know if I'm chosen though. I think it's just more of a burden.
I can understand why you would feel that way. I mean, sometimes it's better not to know. So, yeah, that would definitely be difficult to deal with in a lot of cases. It looks like D Truth is the next question. D wants to know, Sam, I've had several encounters, and since then I won't camp in the woods overnight. How about you?
I definitely would not camp alone. When I was younger, did a lot of camping, backpacking, and hiking, especially in my early adult life. I wouldn't now. There's no way. I mean, just the Dogman, knowing it's real, the Bigfoot stuff that I've experienced. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't go alone. And if I did go, I would go prepared. Now, I'm not saying I would go like armed to the teeth. Um, I think that I would go more humbly into the woods. I think I'd definitely take like maybe some bear mace and maybe an air horn. I think I'd take something to at least maybe give me an opportunity. But I wouldn't just go nimbly bimbly into the woods and camp by myself. There's no way. Not anymore. When I was younger, I was adventurous and I would do all that stuff, but not now. I think I know too much to be real to go and do that.
I hope someday down the road that changes and you can actually head back out into the woods and do a lot of these things that you used to like to do before you had these experiences. But baby steps, also time will tell. You never really know if that might not happen or not. If I was betting, I would bet it actually does happen someday. But yeah, it's hard to say. Well, I've got another one for you from Brianna Wood. And Brianna wants to know, how smart do you think the Dogman was?
Oh, I think it was exceptionally smart. I think they all are. I think just based on other stories, my encounter is not so much of a telltale how smart they are. Mine might have just been chance or a random sighting. But from what I've heard and from other witnesses and encounters, these things I think very much well could be well smarter than us. I think they have to be. I mean, they've avoided being seen and being, caught. They have to be smarter than us to do that. I've heard that they, tactically move through the woods and escort people out of their areas. I've heard that, they have this mind speak ability, which I can't speak to, but it just has to be a higher level of intelligence. So I would say that, they definitely are smarter than we are. They have to be.
At least in some ways, I think they're smarter than we are. Maybe some ways not, but yeah, like you said, definitely in some ways they have to be. This next one up is from Glenn Kamada, and Glenn wants to know, did this encounter affect your daughter in any way? For example, nightmares.
You know, that's actually funny. I'm glad that you brought that up because I actually brought it up to my daughter a couple times, and she absolutely does not remember anything about it. Nothing. I brought it up to her. I said, "You remember we saw that big dog? We're driving home from choir practice." And she's like, "What? What are you talking about?" I'm like, "The big dog." She's like, "No, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You acknowledged it to me. You said big dog. You were even playing around, jokingly saying this to me." But yet she has no memory of it, which I think is incredibly odd. I have asked her several times, and she just doesn't remember. Now, my daughter, she's an honor roll student. She's very smart. She's very, grown up for her age, and for her to look at me and say she doesn't remember something, that is incredibly rare. The girl can remember stuff I can't remember. So for her to look at me and go, "I don't know what you're talking about, Dad," seems very peculiar in a lot of ways, and I can't explain it. But I'm glad actually somebody brought that up because I still to this day do not understand why she doesn't remember seeing this thing the way I did.
I think I've got an answer for that. I think for her, it was just a non event. And for non events, you don't burn those really even into short term memory, maybe for an hour or two, but after that, it's just out of sight, out of mind. I could be wrong again about that, but I'm pretty sure that's why she didn't remember it. This next question for you, Sam, is from Baby Girl, and she wants to know, how tall was it on all fours?
So I actually measured at the construction sign where I saw it run past because it ran just in front of the construction sign. And it was one of those big orange signs that they temporarily stick on the road because they just repaved the road. And I actually grabbed my trusty tape measure out of the car. I walked over and I measured, and it was over 4 feet. Just from what I could recollect, it had to be 4 feet and several inches at the shoulders on all four. So to me, that's bigger than any dog or wolf or anything I could ever attribute it to. So it had to be massive.
Yeah, must have been to be 4+ feet at the shoulder. Definitely. The next one up is from Penelope, and Penelope wants to know, Sam, some say alien abductions are generational. Do you think your kids may experience their own Dogman encounters for the same reason?
You know, I, I don't know. That's that's a big one, right? That's the $1 million question. Is this stuff hereditary? I've often heard that it is, and aliens and Bigfoot and all this. If you believe in such a thing, I heard one theory once on a podcast that this guy had mentioned that, the reason we see these things is because our ancestors fought and killed them. So it's programmed in our DNA. We're almost cursed. We're almost haunted by seeing these creatures and these cryptids and these things throughout our lives and throughout the bloodline. I I don't know if that's a real thing. It sounds more like a science fiction movie to me, but maybe it is something that we're more adapt to based on our bloodline or based on our heritage. I don't know. I can't say. I know that in my experience, my mother and my grandmother um, all had these weird, strange things happen. So I mean, maybe it's but who knows? I mean, alien abductions are something completely different, but in some way, I feel like maybe all of it's connected somehow, whether it's spiritually or demonically or whatever it is. I can't explain it. But I really feel like maybe some of it or all of it is all connected. So maybe certain people are more prone to it, and it gets passed down.
You never know. There just might be some there. It's hard to say. Shannon Umenzer has the next question, and Shannon wants to know, did the dog man look at him? Was there ever eye contact?
No, it had a mission. It was s- straight on profile, never turned its head in my direction. I didn't see eye shine. It was looking straight ahead, and it was heading. It knew what it was doing. It was heading straight and didn't deviate in any way. It didn't veer or look at me. It didn't even seem like it moved in a way that, it might stop with a car or hesitate. It made a beeline straight across the road and, from the dry creek bed over into the far high grass and bushes, like I said, across that 300 plus yards or whatever it was. It never once looked at me and never once even acknowledged the car, the headlights. It never acknowledged anything. It just was on a mission. It just went from one side to the other, just straight, fast as you unbelievably could believe.
It doesn't seem fair, does it? The fact that something that looks that way can move like they can. Seems, like I said, almost unfair. This next one up is from Joe Daniels, and Joe wants to know, how would you be coping if this channel and Vic weren't available for you to talk/share experience with?
Well, I'm super glad it is because like I said, you don't just sit around, the lunchroom table at work and talk about this stuff. You don't just, talk to your friends about it or family. It's not something you can. So I'm super thankful to have this outlet to be able to tell my story because, you kind of, hold it inside and it's just nice to get it all out. It actually is very, relieving to get it out. If I didn't have this outlet, if I didn't have this, opportunity to be on Vic's show, I don't know. Like I usually turn to a lot of like my hobbies. I play guitar. I draw. Um, you know, um, I think I would be more. Um, I don't know. I'd be more trying to channel this out in other ways. Maybe writing it down. I think that would probably be helpful to write it all out, get it out of me. So at least I know. Here it is. I will tell you that since this encounter has happened, I do, and this is not, good to really admit, but I drink a lot more. Um, it just seems to help me sleep better at night, and it's probably not healthy for me. I know it's not. I know there's probably a lot of people going to say, "Why are you doing that?" But it's hard to explain when you've experienced something like this. it almost numbs the mind enough to where you can sleep, rest, and being whatever you want to call it, sensitive or whatever you want to call it that I am or I might be, it helps to just take that edge off because sometimes I just feel things in a way that I don't think other people feel. So I don't know how I would be coping with it if I can't get it out in this method. I'm just thankful that I can. Like I said, maybe just writing it down, maybe just getting it on paper and getting it out of me.
You said you weren't all that traumatized by the encounter, so I'm kind of confused. I'm hoping you'll bring clarity for me. When you drink before bedtime, is that to numb the pain and stress and anxiety from the dreams and the other things like that, or is it an attempt to numb the fact that you had that dogman encounter?
I think it's more the dreams and the paranormal stuff. I don't like the Dogman encounter it didn't really traumatize me per se. I think it's more of my mind wandering. I mean, obviously, we all, a lot of people have that problem where their mind wanders, right? Whether it's not even related to, Dogman or the paranormal, it's just work or bills or your kids or whatever it might be. Everyone has that mind wandering, inability to wind down at the end of the day. But for me, it's I think I still have some things that I'm dealing with from when I was little. Like I said, I went through some pretty traumatic paranormal events when I was small. Um, that may have something to do with it. I think sometimes it's just to get my mind to stop, not no, necessarily a traumatic event from the dog man, but maybe just a way to get my mind to ease a bit. And I'm not talking like I don't just pound bottle after bottle after bottle. No, I don't do that. It's just enough to take the edge off. And some of that might just be normal daily stress. It may not even be related. So I don't think it's the dog man thing. I think some of it might be normal, some of it might be just me being more sensitive to things that I don't want to be sensitive to.
That's definitely is a slippery slope. I hope you can stop that habit. I guess time will tell on that, but yeah, I don't like the way that sounds. This next question is from D Truth, and D wants to know, Sam, how long would you say the dogman was? And he's right, you did tell us how tall it was on all fours, but I guess he never did tell us how long it was.
Well, it was wider than my car, um, based on the distance, the 40 something feet that it was away. Um, I mean, from nose to what I thought was a tail, I mean, it had to be every bit of 7 feet. Like I said, fours and being somewhere between 8 to 9 feet tall. So the length of the body had to be, I was driving a fairly mid-size sedan, so it was wider than the car. And I think your average car is what, 6 feet plus. So had to be every bit of 7 feet long, from nose to butt. Tail might have added, a little bit more.
That's pretty long. This next one up is from Joshua Lounsbury, and Josh wants to know, Sam, was it very scraggy looking or well kept? Meaning the hair slash fur. Also, any noticeable scars, if any, that you could remember.
No, I didn't get details like scars. Now the hair, it did look almost not mangy, like it wasn't missing patches of fur, but it looked, my word that I use is gnarly, right? So like when you think of like American Werewolf in London, it had hair, but it wasn't like, you could still see skin and muscle underneath of it. You could still see muscle definition. But it definitely did not look well kept. It looked, you know, like a shaggy wild animal had been out in the world. Like it looked like what you would think. It wasn't like thick fur, but it wasn't thin. It just, and it looked kind of dirty in a way. I don't want to say like dirty, but it looked not like matted fur, like big chunks of matted fur, but it definitely did not look well kept. It looked just, I mean, like I said, my only word I can use is gnarly. It just looked, you know, scary, but not. It did not look like it just got out of a, a shower with some Perel for sure. It looked like it'd been living in the wilderness.
Oh, I'll bet it did. That fits. This isn't a question, it's more of a comment from Melissa Palazzi. Melissa wants to make sure that please thank Sam for sharing his encounters. And I agree. Like I said, thanks again for coming on and doing this. The next question would be from D Truth, and D wants to know, Sam, what color were its eyes?
I didn't get a look at the eyes. There was no eye shine. There was no direct look in my direction. So all I saw was the profile. Um, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell you what color the eyes was. I'm sorry.
Oh, no need to apologize. I mean, it wasn't looking at you, number one, it was moving so fast and your mind was just spinning. So, yeah, you're not to blame for that at all. I've got a question for you from another eyewitness I've spoken with, a really nice lady named Joyce Stone. She wants to know, you think seeing the Dogman caused these dreams? When it was running across in front of you, did it turn its head and look you in the eyes? Looking mine in the eyes deeply affected me.
Yeah, no, it definitely didn't look me in the eyes like we said earlier. I did not see its eyes. It did not look at me. It did not acknowledge me. Um, but the only thing I can attribute to the dreams and the strange things that's happening at night is this. It just seems like it's opened something inside me that hasn't been there since I was a kid. So, for me, it's all I can attribute it to. I can't say. But it definitely didn't look at me, but it definitely had an impact on me in ways that I don't fully understand.
Oh, I'm sure it did. Yeah, that's a given there. This next one up is from D Truth, and D wants to know, Sam, are you glad that you now are aware of Dogmen, or do you wish you never saw it?
That's it's I've thought about that a lot. Like, it was the same thing with like Bigfoot, right? I always wanted to see a Bigfoot, even if it was just a glimpse. I just wanted to know it was real. Never in 1,000 years would have expected that this would be my sighting of something like this. If you would have said Dogman to me, a few years ago, I would have laughed it off and been like, "Pff, whatever, that's you know, movie stuff. That's not real." Even though I, read all the legends and knew all the mythology and all the various cultures and all that for this type of, creature. I, you know, I think that seeing it has just created more curiosity in me than what I had before. I want to know more. I want to understand more. I want to use what knowledge I have to educate others. But I don't, man, that's a hard one because I don't know if I'm better off seeing it or better off not seeing it. I think it definitely has made me go more down the rabbit hole than I really want to, if that makes sense. I think that, you know, it, it, it it's definitely encouraging me to open my mind even more to what else is out there, what else exists, what else is happening. With everything that's going on in the world, we've been through a pandemic, all this stuff. The aliens in Miami, the aliens in Las Vegas, the government coming out and saying UFOs are real, all this stuff. It makes me second guess our reality in a way that I think that maybe I am more appreciative of, because I think a lot of us choose to just sweep that under the rug.
It's undeniable. There's definitely life before you have a Dogman encounter and realize these guys are definitely out there, and there's life after it. So, no, I agree. I've got another question for you from Joshua Lounsbury. And Josh wants to know, was the tail sticking up or down when it moved?
I didn't get a really good look at the tail. Like I said, it wasn't a big bushy tail. It seemed kind of scraggly. It was in a curved, like, smile like shape. that was from the rear down. It wasn't really super long, but it seemed like it was more in line with the body. Like if you went from the rear and you went down to like a smile shape and then back up to where it was almost level with the body again. It seemed like it had a curve to it a bit. But again, it didn't seem real hairy. It didn't seem long. Um, from what I can make of it, obviously it's moving so fast. The tail is one of the last things you're looking at. Me, I'm looking at the head the whole time because it was massive. The mane, like hair, and the snout and the ears is what I was mostly focused on, and I was able though to catch, enough of the body to realize it slanted back a bit into the tail.
You were just trying to take everything in. That's understandable. It looks like Eric Bamberg is the next one up. He wants to know, in what way was the motion unnatural? Was it like a cat speed walking where the legs are a blur, but the body floats?
That's actually a really good way to put it. Like in those old cartoons where, the legs are moving really fast and you can't see before the cart moving really fast before they take off and the body's just sitting still. That's kind of what it reminded me of. The legs were almost a blur and the body just kind of floated. That's actually a very good way of putting it. It just kind of um, just fluently moved in a straight line. But those legs, man, they had to be pushing so much effort and so much speed, to be moving that fast, to be almost a blur. Um, that's I never thought about it that way. That's a perfect where a blur and the body was kind of floating.
That is a good way to frame it up. I've got another one for you from Joshua Lounsbury, and Josh wants to know, were the teeth visible when its mouth was closed?
No, I never got a look at the teeth from the profile. I thought maybe I did get a little bit of a white glare on a canine a couple times as it went across, but I can't say if that's what I saw. If it was just reflection or hair or whatever it was. I thought maybe I did on the snout, but I can't say.
Well, like I said, you're just trying to take in the big picture. I'm impressed that you noticed as many things as you did. So you deserve a lot of credit for that. I'm still a little confused about something though, Sam. When we had that first conversation, you told me that you've always been into Sasquatch, but do you have any fascination with Dogman now that you saw that one?
Yeah. Like I said, I listen to your show a lot. I've read a lot. Um, every time I see something Dogman, I watch it because I'm hoping that I will see something similar to what I saw. And in most cases, no. In most cases, what I see doesn't match up with what other people are saying they've seen. That's why I like some of your witnesses because they give some descriptions that match more closely to what I saw. Um, yeah, I've always been into Bigfoot, but since I saw Dogman, it's like I want to know more. But part of me going out and looking for him, I just have this feeling like I always had this feeling like, well, if you come looking for me, you're gonna find me. Kind of like with Bigfoot, I've always felt that way. If you come looking for me, careful what you wish for, because you will find me, and then you'll have to deal with that circumstance, right? That the consequences. But no, I am definitely interested in cryptids. Obviously, Sasquatch is the one that's always been in my family, and I've most interested in. But since this Dogman encounter, I've not been able to stop thinking about it. So it's like I feel like I'm kind of sucked into this whirlwind of what Dogman is.
Yeah, that's how it normally goes. Have an experience with something like this that's just absolutely not supposed to be out there. And it definitely has a way of occupying your thoughts. So, yeah, that definitely does fit. It does. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight's show, Sam, and sharing this experience with us. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. It's an honor, Vic, to be here, and thank you so much. for letting me get this out. I think a lot of people can relate to when you have something like this and you keep it inside you. It's a little toxic. I can see where other people with more extreme situations, it can cause more trauma and more damage. So for me, just to have an outlet and to be able to get it out, I really appreciate it, and I hope that everybody um, can use anything that I said to help them in some way.
Well, I'm sure it has helped people. I don't doubt that at all. Well, like I said, thanks again so much for your time. And please remember, if you ever do want to reach out because you need help, maybe you start to regress or whatnot, yeah, by all means, please let me know and I'll be there for you.
No, absolutely, I appreciate that, Vic. Absolutely, you've been wonderful.
Well, that goes two ways. It's been great talking with you. Thanks again so much for your time and have a great night. And for everyone listening, thanks again so much for listening to the show. I really do appreciate you doing that. And if by chance you've had a Dogman encounter that you'd like to speak with me about, it doesn't matter if you want to come on the show or not. All you have to do is please go to dogmanencounters.com, submit a report, and then I'll contact you back to schedule a phone consultation. If you do want to be a guest on the show, of course, we can do that, but please understand that's never a requirement. But having said that, thanks again so much for listening and all the help and support you give the listeners, of the eyewitnesses, that is. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thanks again so much and have a great night.